Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bedtime Stories. My name is Tracy and I'm your host. Tonight we're reading chapter, it is Roman numerals, and that is a 14. Yeah, 14. Chapter 14 in the fourth book of the John Carter of Mars series. This is Thuvia, Maid of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is originally published way back in 1916 and therefore it is well within the public domain. I'm safe from getting sued for copyright infringement. Other things people could sue me for, I don't know. But like this one, no. Nobody can sue me for this. Yay! Anyway, before I get started on this chapter, which is entitled Kulan Tith's Sacrifice, I need to ask you a series of very serious queries. Have you gone pee in the potty yet? Have you brushed your teeth? Is your water next to the bed? Have you done your stretches? Got all that done already? So good. So good. All right. Well, since there's nothing else left to do besides like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell if you feel so called. I ain't gonna force you. Because, I can't. So, I'm not gonna. All right. Well, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right. Kulan Tith's Sacrifice, which is chapter 14. The morning of the second day of her incarceration in the East Tower in the palace of Astok, Prince of Dusar, found Thuvia of Betarth waiting in dull apathy the coming of the assassin. She had exhausted every possibility of escape, going over and over again the door and the windows, the floor and the walls. The solid ursite slabs she could not even scratch. The tough Barsoomian glass of the windows would have shattered to nothing less than a heavy sledge in the hands of a strong man. Would have shattered to nothing less, than a heavy sledge in the hands of a strong man. The door and the lock were impregnable. There was no escape. And they had stripped her of her weapons so that she could not even anticipate the hour of her doom, thus robbing them of the satisfaction of witnessing her last moments. When would they come? Would Astok do the deed with his own hands? She doubted that he had the courage for it. At heart he was a coward. She had known it since first she had heard him brag as a visitor at the court of her father, he had sought to impress her with his valor. She could not help but compare him with another. And with whom would an affianced bride compare an unsuccessful suitor? With her betrothed? And did Thuvia of Betarth now measure Astok of Dusar by the standards of Kulan Tith, Jeddak of Kaul? She was about to die. Her thoughts were her own, to do with as she pleased, yet furthest from them was Kulan Tith. Instead, the figure of the tall and comely Heliumite filled her mind, crowding therefrom all other images. She dreamed of his noble face, the quiet dignity of his bearing, the smile that lit his eyes as he conversed with his friends, and the smile that touched his lips as he fought with his enemies, the fighting smile of his Virginian sire. Ugh. And Thuvia of Betarth, true daughter of Barsoom, found her breath quickening and heart leaping to the memory of this other smile, the smile that she would never see again. With a little half sob, the girl sank to the pile of silks and furs that were tumbled in confusion beneath the east window, burying her face in her arms. In the corridor outside her prison room, two men had paused in heated argument. I tell you again, Astok, one was saying, that I shall not do this thing unless you be present in the room. There was little of the respect due royalty in the tone of the speaker's voice. The other, noting it, flushed. Do not impose too far upon my friendship for you, Vascor, he snapped. There is a limit to my patience. There is no question of royal prerogative here, returned Vascor. You ask me to become an assassin in your stead and against your Jeddak's strict injunctions. You are in no position, Astok, to dictate to me, but rather should you be glad to accede to my reasonable request that you be present, thus sharing the guilt with me. Why should I bear it all? The younger man scowled, but he advanced toward the locked door, and as it swung in upon its hinges, he entered the room beyond, at the side of Gascoigne. Across the chamber, the girl, hearing them enter, rose to her feet and faced them. Under the soft copper of her skin, she blanched just a trifle, but her eyes were brave and level, and the haughty tilt of her firm little chin was eloquent of loathing and contempt. You still prefer death? Asked Astok. To you? Yes, replied the girl coldly. The Prince of Dusar turned to Vascour and nodded. The noble drew his short sword and crossed the room toward Thuvia. "Kneel," he commanded. "I prefer to die standing," she replied. "As you will," said Vascour, feeling the point of his blade with his left thumb. "In the name of Nutus, Jeddak of Dusar," he cried, and ran quickly toward her. "In the name of Cthorus, Prince of Helium," came in low tones from the doorway. Vascour turned to see the pantheon he had recruited at his son's house leaping across the floor toward him. The fellow brushed past Astok with an "After him, you calot!" Vascour wheeled to meet the charging man. "What means this treason?" he called. Astok, with bared sword, leapt to Vascour's assistance. The pantheon's sword clashed against that of the noble, and in the first encounter Vascour knew that he faced a master swordsman. Before he half realized the stranger's purpose, he found the man between himself and Thuvia of Petarth, at bay facing the two swords of the Dusarians. But he fought not like a man at bay. Ever was he the aggressor, and though always he kept his flashing blade between the girl and her enemies, yet he managed to force them hither and thither about the room, calling to the girl to follow close behind him. Until it was too late, neither Vascour nor Astok dreamed of that which lay in the pantheon's mind. But at last, as the fellow stood with his back toward the door, both understood. They were pinned in their own prison, and now the intruder could slay them at his will, for Thuvia of Petarth was bolting the door at the man's direction, first taking the key from the opposite side, where Astok had left it when they had entered. Astok, as was his way, finding the enemy did not fall immediately before their swords, was leaving the brunt of the fighting to Vascour. And now, as his eyes appraised the pantheon carefully, they presently went wider and wider, for slowly he had come to recognize the features of the Prince of Helium. The Heliumite was pressing close upon Vascour. The noble was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Astok saw that he could not for long withstand the cunning craft of that terrible sword hand. "Courage, Vascour," he whispered in the other's ear. "I have a plan. Hold him but a moment longer, and all will be well." But the balance of the sentence, "with Astok, Prince of Dusar," he did not voice aloud. Vascour, dreaming no treachery, nodded his head, and for a moment succeeded in holding Cthorus at bay. Then the Heliumite and the girl saw the Dusarian prince run swiftly to the opposite side of the chamber, touch something in the wall that sent a great panel swinging inward, and disappear into the black vault beyond. It was done so quickly that by no possibility could they have intercepted him. Cthorus, fearful lest Vascour might similarly elude him, or Astok return immediately with reinforcements, sprang viciously in upon his antagonist, and a moment later the headless body of the Dusarian noble rolled upon the Ursite floor. "Come," cried Cthorus, "there is no time to be lost. Astok will be back in a moment with enough warriors to overpower me." But Astok had no such plan in mind, for such a move would have meant the spreading of the fact among the palace gossips that the Parthian princess was a prisoner in the East Tower. Quickly would the word have come to his father, and no amount of falsifying could have explained away the facts that the Jeddak's investigation would have brought to light. Instead, Astok was racing madly through the long corridor to reach the door of the tower room before Cthorus and Thuvia left the apartment. He had seen the girl remove the key and place it in her pocket pouch, and he knew that a dagger point driven into the keyhole from the opposite side would imprison them in the secret chamber until 8 dead worlds circled a cold, dead sun. As fast as he could run, Astok entered the main corridor that led to the tower chamber. Would he reach the door in time? What if the Heliumite should have already emerged, and he should run upon him in the passageway? Astok felt a cold chill run up his spine. He had no stomach to face that uncanny blade. He was almost at the door. Around the next turn of the corridor it stood. No, they had not left the apartment. Evidently, Vascour was still holding the Heliumite. Astok could scarce repress a grin at the clever manner in which he had outwitted the noble and disposed of him at the same time. And then he rounded the turn and came face to face with an auburn-haired white giant. The fellow did not wait to ask the reason for his coming. Instead, he leapt upon him with the longsword, so that Astok had to parry a dozen vicious cuts before he could disengage himself and flee back down the runway. A moment later, Cthorus and Thuvia entered the corridor from the secret chamber. "Well, Car Comac?" asked the Heliumite. "It is fortunate that you left me here, Red Man," said the bowman. "I but just now intercepted one whom seemed over-anxious to reach this door. It was he whom they call Astok, Prince of Dusar." Cthorus smiled. Where is he now? He asked. He escaped my blade and ran down this corridor, replied Carcomac. We must lose no time, then, exclaimed Cathoris. He will have the guard upon us yet. Together the three hastened along the winding passages, through which Cathoris and Carcomac had tracked the Dusarians by the marks of the latter's sandals in the thin dust that overspread the floors of these seldom used passageways. They had come to the chamber at the entrances to the lifts before they met with opposition. Here they found a handful of guardsmen and an officer, who, seeing that they were strangers, questioned their presence in the palace of Astok. Once more, Cathoris and Carcomac had recourse to their blades, and before they had won their way to one of the lifts, the noise of the conflict must have aroused the entire palace, for they heard men shouting, and as they passed the many levels on their quick passage to the landing stage, they saw armed men running hither and thither in search of the cause of the commotion. Beside the stage lay the Thuvia, and with 3 warriors on guard. Again the Heliumite and the Lotharian fought shoulder to shoulder, but the battle was soon over, for the Prince of Helium alone would have been a match for any 3 that Dusar could produce. Scarce had the Thuvia risen from the ways ere had 100 or more fighting men leapt to view upon the landing stage. At their head was Astok of Dusar, and as he saw the 2 he had thought so safely in his power slipping from his grasp, he danced with rage and chagrin, shaking his fists and hurling abuse and vile insults at them. With her bow inclined upward at a dizzy angle, the Thuvia shot meteor-like into the sky. From a dozen points, swift patrol boats darted after her, for the scene upon the landing stage above the palace of the Prince of Dusar had not gone unnoticed. A dozen times shots grazed the Thuvia's side, and as Cathoris could not leave the control levers, Thuvia of Petarth turned the muzzles of the craft's rapid-fire guns upon the enemy as she clung to the steep and slippery surface of the deck. It was a noble race and a noble fight, one against a score now, for other Dusarian craft had joined in the pursuit, but Astok, Prince of Dusar, had built well when he built the Thuvia. None in the navy of his sire possessed a swifter flyer, no other craft so well armored or so well armed. One by one the pursuers were distanced, and as the last of them fell out of range behind, Cathoris dropped the Thuvia's nose to a horizontal plane, as with lever drawn to the last notch, she tore through the thin layer of dying Mars toward the east and Petarth. 13,500 hands away lay Petarth, a stiff 30-hour journey for the swiftest of flyers, and between Dusar and Petarth might lie half the navy of Dusar, for in this direction was the reported seat of the great naval battle that even now might be in progress. Could Cathoris have known precisely where the great fleets of the contending nations lay, he would have hastened to them without delay, for in the return of Thuvia to her sire lay the greatest hope of peace. Half the distance they covered without sighting a single warship, and then Carcomac called Cathoris's attention to a distant craft that rested upon the ochre vegetation of the great dead sea bottom, above which the Thuvia was speeding. About the vessel many figures could be seen swarming. With the aid of powerful glasses, the Heliumite saw that they were green warriors, and that they were repeatedly charging down upon the crew of the stranded airship. The nationality of the latter he could not make out at so great a distance. It was not necessary to change the course of the Thuvia to permit the passing directly above the scene of battle. Cathoris dropped his craft a few hundred feet, that he might have a better and closer view. If the ship was of a friendly power, he could do no less than stop and direct his guns upon her enemies, though with the precious freight he carried he scarcely felt justified in landing, for he could offer but 2 swords in reinforcement, scarce enough to warrant jeopardizing the safety of the Princess of Petarth. As they came close above the stricken ship, they could see that it would be but a question of minutes before the green horde would swarm across the armored bulwarks to glut the ferocity of their bloodlust upon the defenders. It would be futile to descend, said Cathoris to Thuvia. The craft may even be of Dusar. She shows no insignia. All that we may do is fire upon the hordemen. And as he spoke, he stepped to one of the guns and deflected its muzzle toward the green warriors at the ship's side. At the first shot from the Thuvia, those upon the vessel drew below evidently discovered her for the first time. Immediately a device fluttered from the bow of the warship on the ground. Thuvia of Petarth caught her breath quickly, glancing at Cathoris. The device was that of Kulantith, Jeddak of Kaul, the man to whom the Princess of Petarth was betrothed. How easy for the Heliumite to pass on, leaving his rival to the fate that could not for long be averted. No man could accuse him of cowardice or treachery, for Kulantith was in arms against Helium, and further, upon the Thuria were not enough swords to delay even temporarily the outcome that already was a foregone conclusion in the minds of the watchers. What would Cthulhu's Prince of Helium do? Scarce had the device broken to the faint breeze ere the bow of the Thuria dropped at a sharp angle toward the ground. "Can you navigate her?" asked Cthulhu of Thuvia. The girl nodded. "I am going to try to take the survivors aboard," he continued. "It will need both Carcomac and myself to man the guns, while the Caulians take to the boarding tackle. Keep her bow depressed against the rifle fire. She can bear it better in her forward armor, and at the same time the propellers will be protected." He hurried to the cabin as Thuvia took the control. A moment later the boarding tackle dropped from the keel of the Thuria, and from a dozen points along either side stout, knotted leathern lines trailed downward. At the same time a signal broke from her bow. "Prepare to board us." A shout arose from the deck of the Caulian warship. Cthulhu, who by this time had returned from the cabin, smiled sadly. He was about to snatch from the jaws of death the man who stood between himself and the woman he loved. "Take the port bow gun, Carcomac," he called to the bowman, and himself strapped to the gun upon the starboard bow. They could now feel the sharp shock of the explosives. Explosions of the green warriors vomited their hail of death and decides of the staunch. They could now feel the sharp shock of the explosions of the green warriors vomited their hail of death and decides of the staunch Thuria. I don't know what the heck. That sentence is put together all kinds of weird. I'm sorry. It was a forlorn hope at best. At any moment, the repulsive ray tanks might be pierced. The men upon the Caulian ship were battling with renewed hope. In the bow stood Kulantith, a brave figure fighting beside his brave warriors, beating back the ferocious green men. The Thuria came low above the other craft. The Caulians were forming under their officers in readiness to board, and then a sudden fierce fusillade from the rifles of the green warriors vomited their hail of death and destruction into the side of the brave flyer. Like a wounded bird, she dived suddenly Marsward, careening drunkenly. Thuvia turned the bow upward in an effort to avert the imminent tragedy, but she succeeded only in lessening the shock of the flyer's impact as she struck the ground beside the Caulian ship. And the green men saw only 2 warriors and a woman upon the deck of the Thuria. A savage shout of triumph arose from their ranks, while an answering groan broke from the lips of the Caulians. The former now turned their attention upon the new arrival, for they saw her defenders could soon be overcome, and that from her deck they could command the deck of the better manned ship. As they charged, a shout of warning came from Kulantith upon the bridge of his own ship, and with it an appreciation of the valor of the act that had put the smaller vessel in these sore straits. "Who is it," he cried, "that offers his life in the service of Kulantith? Never was wrought a nobler deed of self-sacrifice upon Barsoom." The green horde was scrambling over the Thuria's side as there broke from the bow the device of Cthulhu, Prince of Helium, in reply to the query of the Jeddak of Kaul. None upon the smaller flyer had opportunity to note the effect of this announcement upon the Caulians, for their attention was claimed solely now by that which was transpiring upon their own deck. Carcomac stood behind the gun he had been operating, staring with wide eyes at the oncoming hideous green warriors. Cthulhu, seeing him thus, felt a pang of regret that, after all, this man that he had thought so valorous should prove, in the hour of need, as spineless as Jav or Tario. "Carcomac, the man!" he shouted. "Grip yourself! Remember the days of the glory of the seafarers of Lothar. Fight! Fight, man! Fight as never man fought before! All that remains to us is to die fighting!" Carcomac turned toward the Heliumite, a grim smile upon his lips. "Why should we fight?" he asked, "against such fearful odds? There is another way, a better way. Look!" He pointed toward the companionway that led below deck. The green men, a handful of them, had already reached the Thuria's deck as Cthulhu glanced in that direction the Lotharian had indicated. The sight that met his eyes set his heart to thumping in joy and relief. Thuvia Petarth might yet be saved? Far from below there poured a stream of giant bowmen, grim and terrible. Not the bowmen of Tario or Jav, but the bowmen of an Odoir of bowmen, savage fighting men, eager for the fray. The green warriors paused in momentary surprise and consternation, but only for a moment. Then with horrid war cries they leapt forward to meet these strange new foemen. A volley of arrows stopped them in their tracks. In a moment the only green warriors upon the deck of the Thuvia were dead warriors, and the bowmen of Comac were leaping over the vessel's side to charge the hordemen upon the ground. Utan after Utan tumbled from the bowels of the Thuvia to launch themselves upon the unfortunate green men. Kulentith and his Kaulians stood wide-eyed and speechless with amazement as they saw thousands of these strange, fierce warriors emerge from the companionway of the small craft that could not comfortably have accommodated more than 50. At last the green men could withstand the onslaught of overwhelming numbers no longer. Slowly at first, they fell back across the ochre plain. The bowmen pursued them. Comac, standing upon the deck of the Thuvia, trembled with excitement. At the top of his lungs he voiced the savage war cry of his forgotten day. He roared encouragement and commands at his battling Utans, and then, as they charged further and further from the Thuvia, he could no longer withstand the lure of battle. Leaping over the ship's side to the ground, he joined the last of his bowmen as they raced off over the dead sea bottom in pursuit of the fleeing green horde. Below a low promontory of what once had been an island, the green men were disappearing toward the west. Close upon their heels raced the fleet bowmen of a bygone day, and forging steadily ahead among them, Cathoris and Thuvia could see the mighty figure of Comac brandishing aloft the Torcanesian short sword with which he was armed, as he urged his creatures after the retreating enemy. As the last of them disappeared behind the promontory, Cathoris turned toward Thuvia of Petarth. "They have taught me a lesson, these vanishing bowmen of Lothar," he said. "When they have served their purpose, they remain not to embarrass their masters by their presence. Kulentith and his warriors are here to protect you. My acts have constituted the proof of my honesty of purpose. Goodbye." And he knelt at her feet, raising a bit of her harness to his lips. The girl reached out a hand and laid it upon the thick black hair of the head bent before her. Softly she asked, "Where are you going, Cathoris?" "With Comac, the bowman," he replied. "There will be fighting and forgetfulness." The girl put her hands before her eyes, as though to shut out some mighty temptation from her sight. "May my ancestors have mercy upon me," she cried, "if I say the thing I have no right to say. But I cannot see you cast your life away, Cathoris, Prince of Helium. Stay, my chieftain, stay. I love you." A cough behind them brought them both about, and there they saw standing not 2 paces from them, Kulentith, Jeddak of Kaul. For a long moment none spoke. Then Kulentith cleared his throat. "I could not help hearing all that passed," he said. "I am no fool, to be blind to the love that lies between you. Nor am I blind to the lofty honor that has caused you, Cathoris, to risk your life and hers to save mine, though you thought that that very act would rob you of the chance to keep her for your own. Nor can I fail to appreciate the virtue that has kept your lips sealed against words of love for this Heliumite. Thuvia, for I know that I have but just heard the first declaration of your passion for him. I do not condemn you. Rather, should I have condemned you that you had entered a loveless marriage with me. Take back your liberty, Thuvia of Petarth, he cried, and bestow it where your heart already lies enchained. And when the golden collars are clasped about your necks, you will see that Kulentith is the first sword to be raised in declaration of eternal friendship for the new Princess of Helium and her royal mate. And that's the end of the book. I didn't realize it was the last chapter. Oh, man. Oh, well. Okay. Well, good night. Sleep tight. The rest of this is a glossary. Don't let the bedbugs bite. And if they do, I hope you bite them back. Our next project for the bedtime stories, I'm actually intending to do a one-woman show of Midsummer Night's Dream. I said that I was going to do it a long time ago. I opened up a loop a couple years ago, and I need to shut it. I need to close that loop. I said I was going to do this, and I have been working up the gumption to do it, and now I think I finally have it. I've done enough improv now that I'm fully comfortable with being a moron on camera. If I can do it on stage, I can do it on camera. Heck yeah. And so, yeah. Stay tuned for that. It's going to be coming up in probably... I should get going, be able to upload the first scene in a month, I'd say. A month is a long time. I should be able to get it all done and get at least the first scene done in a month. I'm working out costumes and everything right now. I hope that you will stick around, suggest me to your friends and loved ones, and I don't know, see where it goes. We'll see what happens. Oh, goodness. We'll see what happens, friends. All right. Good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bedbugs bite. And if they do, please bite them back. You're worth it. I love you.